I'm Ava Thompson, 38, and the art studio I spent 9 years perfecting became the center of a family war I never saw coming. When my sister Rebecca's husband walked out, my parents decided my creative sanctuary would make a perfect emergency home for her and 3 kids. They didn't realize I'd already signed lease papers for my Florence adventure. The look on their faces when I finally told them still haunts me at night. The relationship between passion and practicality had always been a tightrope walk in my family. My journey as an artist began in childhood with crayon masterpieces proudly displayed on our refrigerator, but it wasn't until I turned 26 that I dared to pursue art as an actual career. My parents, both practical Midwestern accountants, viewed my artistic ambitions with thinly veiled concern. "It's wonderful to have hobbies," my mother would say while subtly sliding community college brochures for business degrees across the dinner table. Despite their reservations, I persevered through art school, working double shifts at a local coffee shop to pay tuition and rent. By 29, I had saved enough for a down payment on a modest 2-bedroom bungalow in a transitioning neighborhood of Milwaukee. The house itself was nothing spectacular: cracked tiles in the bathroom, outdated kitchen cabinets, and carpeting that had seen better decades. But what sold me instantly was the detached garage with its high ceilings and northern-facing windows, perfect natural light for an artist's workspace. Over 3 years, I transformed that neglected garage into my dream studio. Every spare dollar went into the conversion: insulation for Wisconsin winters, proper lighting, custom-built storage for canvases and supplies, a small kiln for my ceramic experiments, and the vintage drafting table I found at an estate sale that became the heart of my creative space. My hands bore the calluses and paint stains of this labor of love. I laid the bamboo flooring myself, installed the sink with help from YouTube tutorials, and painted the walls the perfect shade of calm ivory that wouldn't interfere with color perception. "You've created magic here, my best friend," Mia declared the first time she saw the completed studio. She wasn't wrong. The space vibrated with potential and promise. This wasn't just a room. It was the physical manifestation of my commitment to my art, a declaration that I belonged in the creative world. My sister, Rebecca, viewed my life choices with a mixture of confusion and subtle condescension. 3 years my junior, she had followed our parents' implied life script with precision: a college degree in business, marriage to James, a successful medical equipment sales representative at 26, and 3 children in quick succession: Emma, Liam, and Charlotte. Her colonial-style home in the suburbs came complete with a 3-car garage, membership to the country club, and professional family portraits updating their Christmas cards annually. "It must be so freeing to just focus on yourself," she once commented while bouncing Charlotte on her hip during a rare visit to my studio. The statement came wrapped in a smile but landed like a subtle accusation. In our family's unspoken value system, Rebecca was winning at life while I was still playing with paints. Yet, something unexpected happened in the past year. My dedication began bearing fruit beyond even my optimistic expectations. A series of mixed media pieces exploring female resilience caught the attention of a respected gallery owner. This led to my first solo exhibition, which sold out completely. Art critics actually wrote about my evocative use of texture and negative space. Suddenly, my name appeared on lists of emerging artists to watch. Invitations to group shows in Chicago and New York arrived in my inbox. Then came the email that changed everything: an opportunity for a year-long residency program at a prestigious art institute in Florence, Italy. The acceptance came with studio space, a modest stipend, and the chance to study Renaissance techniques under masters while developing my contemporary vision. It was everything I had ever dreamed of but never truly believed would happen. The practical considerations were daunting. I couldn't afford to keep paying my mortgage while living abroad. Selling felt premature. This house contained my history and future. The solution came through Clara, a local art teacher looking for a temporary place while her own home underwent major renovations. We connected through mutual friends in the art community, and the arrangement seemed perfect. She would care for my home, water my overgrown collection of houseplants, and even use the studio to create her own work between teaching assignments. The lease agreement we signed was straightforward, 12 months with an option to extend if my residency continued. Clara paid 3 months' rent up front, providing me with crucial funds for travel expenses and settling into Italy. We spent an afternoon going through the quirks of the house, the back door that needed a special touch to lock properly, the temperamental water heater, and the location of essential house documents. "This space has beautiful energy," Clara remarked, running her hand along my workbench. "I'll honor it while you're gone." As my departure date grew closer, I felt increasingly protective of my plans. I told Mia and a few close friends about Florence, but kept details vague with family. My parents had finally begun acknowledging my artistic accomplishments, but their praise came tinged with surprise, as though they were complimenting a child who unexpectedly solved a difficult math problem. Sharing news of the residency would invite questions, opinions, and potentially dismissive remarks about gallivanting around Europe. I decided to wait until arrangements were finalized before making a formal announcement. Little did I know, this decision to protect my joy would soon collide with a family crisis none of us saw coming. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was packing up supplies I wouldn't need in Florence. My mother's voice carried an unusual edge as she requested my immediate presence at their house for an emergency family meeting. "What's happened? Is everyone okay?" I asked immediately, thinking of health scares or accidents. "It's about Rebecca. Just come as soon as you can," she replied before hanging up. The drive to my parents' suburban home took 30 minutes that stretched with anxiety. Their driveway was full, Rebecca's minivan parked haphazardly behind my father's sedan. Inside, the atmosphere felt thick with tension. My mother's eyes were puffy from crying, while my father paced the living room with unusual restlessness. Rebecca sat curled in an armchair, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. In the adjacent den, I could hear the sounds of cartoons and the occasional squeal from my nieces and nephew. "James left," Rebecca said before anyone else could speak. Her voice sounded hollow, detached. "He's been seeing someone from work. They're moving to Phoenix together." The revelation hit like a physical blow. James and Rebecca had always been the perfect couple in our family narrative, the benchmark against which all relationships were measured. Their marriage was supposed to be unshakable. "When did this happen?" I asked, settling beside her on the arm of the chair. 3 days ago. He didn't even have the decency to pack his things when I was out. Made me watch him load up his car. Rebecca's eyes remained fixed on the carpet. "He said he's been unhappy for years. Years. And I never knew." Mom brought tissues and herbal tea while Dad continued his agitated pacing. "The worst part," he interjected, "is that James canceled their joint credit cards before telling her. Left her with practically nothing in the checking account. He's paying for his girlfriend's apartment while Rebecca can't even make the mortgage payment this month." Mom added, her voice rising with indignation. I placed my hand on Rebecca's shoulder, feeling the slight tremor running through her body. Despite our complicated relationship, seeing my sister broken open this way hurt in places I didn't know could feel pain. "The kids don't understand why Daddy isn't coming home," Rebecca whispered. "Charlotte keeps asking when he's coming back from his trip. You'll stay here tonight," Mom declared, reaching for the phone. "I'll call Nancy from church. Her husband's a divorce attorney." The next hour unfolded with intensifying urgency as the full extent of Rebecca's situation became clear. James had systematically prepared his exit for months, transferring savings, establishing separate accounts, even consulting lawyers about minimizing his financial obligations. The family home Rebecca had been so proud of was underwater on the mortgage after a recent refinance to pay for landscaping and a pool. Her part-time job at a boutique wouldn't cover even basic expenses for herself and 3 children. "What about child support?" I asked. Dad shook his head grimly. "That will take time to establish legally. And knowing James, he'll fight for the lowest possible amount. He actually suggested I sell my engagement ring to cover expenses until I figure things out, Rebecca said with a bitter laugh that transformed into ASOB. My parents exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret, something practiced and meaningful. We've been discussing solutions, Mom said carefully. Rebecca and the children need stability right now, a safe place to regroup while the divorce proceedings begin. Of course, I agreed. Have you thought about the guest room here? Or maybe converting Dad's home office temporarily? Another look passed between my parents. Our house isn't suited for 3 active children, Dad responded. The stairs are too steep for Charlotte, and your mother's health couldn't handle the extra work. Mom nodded emphatically. What we need to consider is utilizing available family resources. In times of crisis, families need to come together with creative solutions. A subtle shift occurred in the room's energy, the focus pivoting from Rebecca's emotional support to practical arrangements. I felt an undefined pressure building beneath the surface of the conversation. I can help financially, I offered. The gallery show did well, and I have some savings. I could, that's generous, Olivia. Dad interrupted, but this isn't just about money. It's about providing a safe haven for your sister and those children. A temporary home situation. The word temporary hung in the air with unexpected weight. I'll be traveling soon, I mentioned cautiously, not yet ready to unveil my Italian plans amid this crisis. But maybe when I get back, we can look at longer-term options. For traveling. Mom's eyebrows lifted. Now? When your sister needs support. Rebecca looked up for the first time, her eyes reddened but suddenly alert. Where are you going? It's just some art-related work, I replied vaguely, feeling the bright joy of my Florence opportunity dimming under their scrutiny. Nothing finalized yet. The sound of something crashing in the den provided a welcome interruption. Mom hurried to check on the children while Dad gave me a long, appraising look. We should all take some time to think about how we can best support Rebecca during this difficult transition, he said finally. I'm sure everyone will make the necessary sacrifices. The meeting concluded with no concrete plans, but as I hugged Rebecca goodbye, she whispered, "Thank you for being here," with such genuine gratitude that I felt a twinge of guilt about my undisclosed plans. The drive home was filled with competing emotions, sympathy for my sister, anger at James, and a growing uneasiness about what utilizing available family resources might actually mean. 3 days passed with no further family discussions. I used the time to finalize details with the Art Institute in Florence, confirm my flight arrangements, and continue organizing my studio. Clara had stopped by to measure spaces for her own furniture, her excitement a welcome counterpoint to the heaviness of Rebecca's situation. The doorbell rang just as I was cataloging brushes to take versus leave behind. Through the window, I spotted my parents' car and Rebecca's minivan in my driveway. No warning call, no text message asking if I was available. The spontaneous family visit sent a wave of apprehension through me. We were in the neighborhood and thought we'd stop by, Mom announced cheerfully as I opened the door. This was transparently untrue. My neighborhood was nowhere near any place my parents would normally visit. Rebecca trailed behind with Emma, Liam, and Charlotte in tow. The children appeared subdued, unusual for their typically boisterous personalities. My father carried a measuring tape, which he absently slipped into his pocket when he saw me notice it. What a surprise, I managed, stepping aside to let them enter. I was just working on some projects. Perfect timing then, Dad replied with forced joviality. We've been brainstorming about Rebecca's situation, and we had an idea we wanted to discuss with you in person. Mom was already moving through my living room with appraising eyes, noting the packed boxes I'd begun assembling for storage. Spring cleaning, she asked, though we were firmly in autumn. Just organizing some things, I answered vaguely, watching as my father guided everyone toward the back door that led to my studio. An unsettled feeling grew in my stomach. Children, be careful not to touch anything, Rebecca cautioned as they entered my sacred creative space. Liam immediately reached for a set of carved wooden stamps on a nearby shelf. This is quite spacious, Dad commented, his eyes scanning the room with calculation rather than appreciation. Much bigger than it looks from outside. Mom nodded enthusiastically. And such wonderful light. All these windows. They walked the perimeter of my studio with the deliberate assessment of property developers rather than visitors. Dad pulled out his measuring tape again, stretching it across the width of the room while Mom opened the supply closet I'd custom built. What exactly are you doing? I finally asked, confusion giving way to a creeping dread. They exchanged that look again, the one from the family meeting, before Mom placed her hand on my arm. Sweetie, we've come up with the perfect solution for Rebecca's housing crisis, she announced. Your studio would make an ideal temporary living space for her and the children. The words hit me like cold water. My studio. It makes perfect sense, Dad continued, enthusiasm building. With some minor modifications, this could easily accommodate a bed for Rebecca and bunk beds for the older two. Charlotte's crib could go by the north wall. The plumbing is already in place for a small bathroom addition, Mom added, gesturing toward my utility sink. James left them with practically nothing, and this would give them breathing room to rebuild. Rebecca stood awkwardly by the door, not meeting my eyes. The children had grown bored with the adult conversation and were now exploring my supplies with increasing boldness. Charlotte had found a container of polymer clay and was squeezing colorful lumps between her fingers. But this is my workspace, I said, struggling to process their proposal. Everything I do, my entire career, happens here. Well, yes, Mom acknowledged with a dismissive wave, but you have the whole house. You could easily set up a corner in your spare bedroom for your hobby. My hobby? The word stung like a slap. This isn't a hobby. This is my profession. My livelihood. Dad sighed with the patient condescension he reserved for what he considered unreasonable behavior. Olivia, we're talking about your sister and 3 innocent children who have nowhere to go. Surely your art projects can be put on hold temporarily. Art projects, I repeated numbly, watching as Liam picked up one of my expensive sable brushes. It would just be for a few months, Rebecca finally spoke, her voice small, until I can find a job that actually pays enough for an apartment. I took a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts. I understand Rebecca needs help, and I want to support her, but there's something you don't know. I'm not just traveling soon. I've been accepted to a year-long residency program in Florence. I leave in 3 weeks. Instead of recognition or congratulations, my announcement was met with blank stares, followed by scoffs of disbelief. Florence, Italy? Dad clarified. You're planning to abandon your job and home to paint in Italy at a time like this? I'm not abandoning anything, I countered, feeling defensive. This is a prestigious opportunity that could define my career. Artists compete globally for these positions. Mom exchanged a meaningful glance with Rebecca before turning back to me. Honey, we understand you enjoy your painting, but this is real life with real responsibilities. Your sister has 3 children who need a safe place to live. And I need to pursue my career, I insisted, feeling increasingly cornered. This isn't an impulse decision. I've been working toward this opportunity for years. But you can paint anywhere, Dad argued. Italy will still be there after Rebecca gets back on her feet. The casual dismissal of years of dedicated work, of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, ignited something in me. Would you tell a doctor to put their medical career on hold? Or an engineer to just set aside their projects? Why is my profession so easily disposable in your eyes? That's different, Mom replied immediately. How? How is it different? Because those are established careers with stability and benefits, Dad explained as if speaking to a child. Your painting is wonderful, but it's not a dependable livelihood. The irony was bitter. They had no idea that my undependable art had recently sold for more than Dad made in 3 months. But I'd stopped sharing my successes after years of minimizing responses. Charlotte had now wandered to my latest canvas, fingers dangerously close to the still-drying surface. Rebecca made no move to redirect her. Look, Mom said with forced patience, we've given this a lot of thought. You could stay in our basement for a few months. We'd clear out the holiday decorations. By the time you get back from your trip, Rebecca might have found her own place. Or, Dad added, you could just postpone this Italy thing until next year. Family comes first, Olivia. The implied message was clear. My dreams were optional luxuries, while Rebecca's needs constituted real priorities. It was a familiar dynamic, stretching back to childhood when my art lessons were expendable when money got tight, but Rebecca's soccer tournaments remained sacrosanct. I need time to think about this, I finally said, carefully extracting my paintbrush from Liam's grip. There isn't much time, Mom pressed. Rebecca needs to be out of her house by the end of the month. We thought we could start moving some of your art supplies to storage this weekend. The casual presumption stunned me into silence. They had not only decided my studio would be sacrificed, but had already planned the logistics without my consent. We should go, Rebecca suddenly announced, gathering her children. Thanks for considering this, Liv. I know it's a lot to ask. Her voice held a strange mixture of entitlement and genuine gratitude. As they filed out, Dad paused at the door. Family pulls together in crisis, Olivia. Your mother and I have always taught you girls that. I stood alone in my studio after they left, surrounded by the creative space I'd built with my own hands, now mentally partitioned into bedrooms and play areas in my family's imagination. The silence felt hostile, filled with unspoken expectations and the weight of decisions not yet made, but somehow already determined. Sleep evaded me that night as conversations with my family replayed in endless loops. Each mental replay revealed new layers of disrespect I hadn't fully processed in the moment. By dawn, I sat at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cooling mug of tea, torn between lifelong family loyalty and the fierce protection of the future I'd worked so hard to create. The morning light gradually filled my studio as I wandered through it, touching tools and materials that had become extensions of myself. This space represented not just physical resources, but years of persistence through doubt and criticism. Here, I'd created the collection that finally earned critical recognition. Here, I'd received the email accepting me to the Florence program while crying tears of vindication. Memories surfaced of similar patterns throughout childhood. When college acceptance letters arrived, my parents hosted a lavish dinner celebrating Rebecca's business school scholarship, but merely nodded at my art school admission with cautionary warnings about practical backup plans. When I purchased this house, they questioned my financial decision while giving Rebecca and James a substantial down payment for their larger home as a wedding gift. The phone interrupted my thoughts. Mia, calling to finalize plans for helping me pack. They want to do what? She exclaimed after I explained yesterday's ambush. Your studio? The one you built from nothing while working double shifts? That studio. They don't see it as particularly important, I admitted, the words still stinging. Mom called it my hobby and suggested I could set up in a bedroom corner. Instead? After your show sold out? After your pieces were featured in American Artist. Mia's indignation felt like a bomb. Have you told them about Florence yet? I tried. Dad called it this Italy thing and suggested postponing it for a year. Mia's exasperated sigh carried through the phone. This is exactly why you didn't tell them sooner. They've never respected your art as a real career. Rebecca is in a genuine crisis, I acknowledged, feeling the pull of conflicting loyalties. She has 3 children and nowhere to go. Your parents have a 4-bedroom house with just the 2 of them, Mia countered. Why aren't they offering their space? Why is your career the automatic sacrifice? The question crystallized something I'd been unable to articulate. Despite their claims about family pulling together, the proposed solution involved only my sacrifice while they maintained their comfortable status quo. You know what this really is, Mia continued when I didn't respond. It's about control. They never wanted you to be an artist, and this is their chance to pull you back into their vision for your life. As difficult as it was to admit, her words resonated with truth. My parents had consistently undermined my artistic path with subtle and not-so-subtle tactics, highlighting newspaper stories about struggling artists, sending job listings for graphic design positions with reliable paychecks, expressing concern about my retirement planning, My phone pinged with an email notification. The Florence program coordinator confirming my studio assignment and sending orientation details. The timing felt significant, a reminder of what awaited if I held firm. Another call came that afternoon, this time from Clara, my soon-to-be tenant. Just wanted to confirm I can drop off some boxes next week. My renovation timeline got moved up, and I might need to move in a few days earlier than planned, if that works for you. The conversation cemented the reality of my commitments. Clara had signed a legal lease. She had already given notice on her current apartment. My verbal agreement with her carried both legal and ethical weight that couldn't be casually dismissed for family convenience. I decided to call Rebecca directly, hoping for a sister-to-sister conversation without our parents' influencing presence. After 4 rings, her voicemail answered. I left a message asking her to call back to discuss options, trying to infuse my voice with supportive concern rather than the frustration simmering beneath. The next morning brought more emails from Florence with visa confirmation and apartment details. As I reviewed these documents, my phone rang with my parents' number. Great news! Mom announced without preamble. Your father found someone interested in buying your larger equipment, that pottery wheel thing and the big easel. They can pick them up next Monday. The casual announcement of plans to sell my possessions without consultation left me momentarily speechless. What are you talking about? I finally managed. You can't sell my equipment. Well, it would have to go somewhere, she explained with strained patience. There's no room in our basement for the larger pieces, and Rebecca will need the space cleared. The money could help with her first month's rent when she finds a new place. The presumption that my decision had already been made ignited something beyond frustration. Mom, stop. I haven't agreed to any of this. You can't sell things that belong to me. Olivia Jean, she replied, using my middle name as she always did when disapproving of my behavior. We assumed you'd have the basic family loyalty to help your sister in her time of need. Rebecca has been crying all night, thinking about where her children will sleep next month. The emotional manipulation was familiar, but no less effective. Guilt flooded through me despite my rational understanding of the situation. I want to help Rebecca, I insisted, but converting my studio isn't the only solution. What about the finished basement at your house? Or using the money from my equipment to help her rent an apartment directly? You know very well your father uses that basement for his model trains, she dismissed. And a short-term rental would just waste money. Rebecca doesn't have your studio is the perfect transitional space until she receives her divorce settlement. The conversation continued in circles, with every alternative I suggested immediately rejected for increasingly trivial reasons. It became painfully clear that they had fixated on my studio as the only acceptable solution, regardless of the impact on my life and career. After hanging up, I found myself shaking with a mixture of anger and anxiety. The walls of my carefully constructed life felt like they were closing in, family expectations squeezing out the future I'd planned. The pressure to acquiesce, to be the good daughter who sacrificed without complaint, pushed against my hard-won professional identity. In that moment of clarity, I realized I faced a fundamental choice. Continue the pattern of yielding my needs to family demands or finally establish boundaries that honored my own life path. Neither option felt clean or simple. Both would exact emotional costs I wasn't sure I was prepared to pay. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. Your mother and I will be over tomorrow morning with boxes. Rebecca found some children's furniture at a consignment shop. The casual presumption that my consent was unnecessary crystallized my resolve. This wasn't just about a physical space. It was about whether my life choices deserved respect. If I surrendered now, I would be accepting their fundamental belief that my career was optional, insignificant, and disposable. I took a deep breath and began drafting a response I knew would forever change my family dynamics, despite my carefully worded text explaining I needed more time to consider options. My parents' SUV and Rebecca's minivan pulled into my driveway precisely at 9 o'clock the next morning. Through my front window, I watched them unload cardboard boxes, cleaning supplies, and what appeared to be a partially disassembled child's bed frame. The children spilled from the minivan with the pent-up energy of kids who'd been promised a new adventure. Opening the door before they knocked, I found myself facing my father's surprised expression, his arms loaded with flattened moving boxes. "We thought we'd get an early start," he explained, brushing past me into the house. Mom followed with a determined smile, pulling on rubber gloves as if preparing for a deep cleaning operation. I texted that I needed more time, I pointed out, watching helplessly as they established beachheads of boxes and supplies throughout my living room. "Time isn't a luxury Rebecca has right now," Mom replied, already opening my hall closet to assess its contents. "The foreclosure process waits for no one." Rebecca entered last, shepherding her children while avoiding my gaze. Emma and Liam immediately raced toward my studio door with the instinctive radar children possess for forbidden spaces. Charlotte toddled after them, a stuffed bunny clutched in one hand. "Kids, please be careful in there," Rebecca called without making any actual move to supervise them. Following the children into my studio, I found Liam already climbing the shelving unit where I stored delicate handmade papers while Emma investigated the drawers containing my organized brush collection. "Those aren't toys," I said firmly, gently guiding Liam down. "There are very expensive and fragile things in here." "Well, they'll need to get used to the space," Mom said, entering behind me. "This will be their bedroom soon, though we'll need to use strong cleaners on everything. All these art chemicals can't be healthy for growing lungs." The casual dismissal of both my property and my imminent protest ignited something deep within me. Years of swallowed responses and acquiescence crystallized into a sudden, unshakable clarity. "No." The single word hung heavy in the air. Mom paused her assessment. "No, what?" "No, this will not be their room. This is my studio." Dad appeared in the doorway, his expression a mask of paternal disappointment. "Olivia, be reasonable. Your sister has nowhere to go." "There are other alternatives," I insisted. Rebecca hovered by the door as Charlotte, now unsupervised, toddled over to the large canvas I was preparing for Florence and dragged her sticky fingers across the gessoed surface. "She's just a baby," Rebecca exclaimed when she saw my face. "Exactly," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Which is exactly why a functioning art studio is not a suitable or safe living space for 3 small children." "They'll adapt," Mom dismissed. "Children are resilient." The irony fueled me. "You're right. Let's talk about being practical. This studio represents years of investment. It's the foundation of my career. And more importantly, it is contractually committed to someone else. Her name is Clara Winters." Silence. "You what?" Dad asked. "I've been accepted to the Berolini Institute in Florence, Italy. My flight leaves in 18 days. This house and studio have been leased to Clara. The contract is signed. The rent has been paid." It felt as if the oxygen had been sucked from the room. Emma and Liam froze, sensing the shift. "You did what?" Mom whispered. "You heard me." Dad's face flushed a deep red. "Without consulting us?" "I signed the lease before James left Rebecca. This is my career and my property. So I'm supposed to live in my car." Rebecca cried, and the familiar family pattern kicked in. Rebecca cries, and the blame shifts to me. "That is not the only solution," I said, holding my ground. "How could you be so selfish?" Mom raged. "This is your flesh and blood." "I am honoring my commitments," I replied. "You'd rather give your home to a stranger than your own sister. It's different. She has kids. And I have a life." The words erupted, louder than I intended. Years of seeking their support, their tolerance, stung in that single moment. Rebecca sobbed, and her children ran to comfort her. "Is Italy more important than your family?" my father asked. I had offered help. I had offered money. It had been rejected. "Stability is important," I said. "And so is respect for my life and my work." Liam pointed a chubby finger toward the back door. Through the glass, we could see Clara's car pulling up. That, I said, my voice steady, is my tenant. You leased your house without telling us. Dad repeated, incredulous. It's my house. My choice. A vast divide opened in that room, a canyon between their expectation of obedience and my need for respect. You're abandoning your sister, Mom said, her voice trembling. I'm setting boundaries. Selfish. It's always been about you and your art. And now Italy. Clara knocked on the back door. We're leaving, Dad announced, his eyes holding a flicker of fear. Family is supposed to be there for each other. They left. Clara sensed the tension. Family, she said with a wry smile, has a way of finding our most vulnerable spots. Reviewing the lease with her was a respite. Clara's excitement about the studio contrasted sharply with my family's dismissal. It was a validation I desperately needed. Dismantling the studio felt like erasing a part of my identity. The silence from my family was deafening. I saw updates on Rebecca's social media. My friends helped me pack. They'll come around, Mia said. Doubts crept in. Was I being too rigid? Rebecca arrived at my door 5 days later. Can we talk? She asked. Our parents were upset. I explained I wasn't sacrificing my needs anymore. She told me what James had said, calling her spoiled. Yours is terrible, but that doesn't mean it's everyone's responsibility, I thought, but didn't say. I saw she was jealous of my confidence and freedom. I researched subsidized housing and offered to help with a deposit. You're still my sister, I said. We talked, and for the first time, I didn't offer advice. I should go, she finally said. A shift had occurred. MY Studio's final day was bittersweet. Clara moved in. It has such beautiful energy, she said. My parents noted the moving boxes when they drove by and knew Rebecca had visited. My dad called, reflecting on my trip to Italy. The change was seismic. He offered support. I showed him my recent sales and articles. He was surprised. I explained how their past dismissals had hurt. He was ironic about her housing situation. When you leave? Tomorrow. Mom asked if she could drive me to the airport. We discussed Florence, and for the first time, they treated my career seriously. That's impressive, Ava, Dad said. The next morning, Rebecca arrived with them. Mom hugged me tightly. We're proud of you, she whispered. On the plane, I sketched. My first video call from Florence was with my whole family. Rebecca reported progress. Dad had hung my paintings in the living room. Distance had yielded healthier relationships. Boundaries created authentic connections. Family shouldn't require the sacrifice of dreams.